Hey folks, welcome to CSC103, the interwebs version. Today we're going to talk some more about methods. Now if you recall last class, I was talking about the idea of programmer-defined methods. And there's three more things I want to tell you about programmer-defined methods before we move on to the idea of recursion next week. So the first thing I want to talk to you about is something called pass-by-value. And then we're going to talk about method overloading. And then we're going to talk about the idea of stubs. All right, so let's get going. I'm going to say goodbye to this delicious meal of chicken, string beans, and some mashed potatoes. Goodbye. All right, let's move to the next page. Here we go. So the first thing I want to do is talk to you about pass-by-value parameters. And to motivate this discussion, what I want you to do is get ready to press the pause button. When I say press pause, I want you to write a method that adds two integers and returns the result. So for example, if I were to have a main program here, and I were to say int x equals 10 and int y equals 20, and then I were to say system out print line add x comma y, what we would see as output for add x comma y is we would see 30 get printed out to the user screen. So your job is going to be to write that method. All right, so press the pause button and then write the method. Press the pause button, press that pause button, press it. Okay, hopefully you press the pause button and you've written out your method. Your method should look something like this. Public, static, int, add, and I'm going to be very deliberate about doing this. I mean, you may have had different names for the parameters for this method, but for me, I'm deliberately going to say that my first parameter is called x and my second parameter is called y. I'm going to create a result here, and then I'm going to say result equals result plus, whoops, that doesn't make any sense. Let's try that again. Say result equals x plus y, and then I'm going to leave a little bit of space here because I want to show you something. Return result. There we go. Okay, now let me just grab that code that was above here. This is kind of cool. I want to pull it down and talk about it. So copy. Now we'll move back down here. Edit. Paste. Let's try that again. Edit. Paste. Okay. Because I want you to take a look at this from the perspective of the main program. So when this method gets executed, what happens is x, which has the value of y, gets copied to this argument x. So this parameter x here gets copied to this argument x. And y, which has the value of 20, gets copied to this y. Now, the x and the y that are arguments here, this x and this y, are different than the x and y that are in the main program. That's very important. And you'll see why in a second. All right, so right now, this has the value of 10, this has the value of 20. When we add x and y together here to produce our result, we're going to add x, which has the value of 10, and y, which has the value of 20, together to get 30. And when we say return result, we're going to be returning the value of 30. And then when we do this add right here, when we return to the main program, this add right here is going to have the value of 30, and we're going to system out print line 30. So all that's kind of a review of what we talked about last class. Now, what I want to do is I want to throw a little twist in here. I'm going to just clean this up for a second. And I want to say, what would happen if right here, inside the add, I said x is equal to 0 and y is equal to 0. And then over here, this is the code for the main program. In the main program, I was to say system out print line x and system out print line y. My question for you would be this: what would the value of the x in this system out print line x and the y in the system out print line y be? So think about that for a second, and then write down what you think the answer would be right here. That's the value of x, and that's the value of y when we're in that system out print line statement. All right, so take a second, think about it, and write down your answer. Okay, so some of you watching this might be thinking that the value of x is 0 and the value of y is 0. And the reasoning being that over here in the add, this x equals 0 and this y equals 0 statements would have reset x and y to 0. And so when we're back here in the main program, this x and this y will have been set to 0. That is actually incorrect. The actual values of x and y are still the 10 and 20 that they were set to inside the main program. Now you might be saying, hey, that doesn't make any sense. But let me see if I can try and explain to you why that would make sense. Okay? So let's just look again at what happens when you call the add method from the main program. So here we are in the main program. We set x equal to 10 and we set y equal to 20. When we call the system out print line here, here's what happens. The x right here, and the y right here, they get copied. So we're going to make a copy, and I'm writing copy up here. So we're going to make a copy of the x that's in the add in the system out print line. We're going to make a copy of that x and copy it to this parameter x here. So the x in the main method and the x in the add method are totally separate x's. They might as well be called different things. I call them the same thing because I wanted to sort of draw out this point. And the same thing happens with the y. The y in the main method and the y in the add method are completely separate y's. And what happens is the value of 20 from the main method, the value of y, which is 20 in the main method, gets copied to the y in the add method. And then we add x and y in the add method, and then we set the parameter x equal to 0 and the parameter y equal to 0 in the add method. But that has no effect. And I'm just going to write that down here. This has no effect on x and y in the main method. And that's because the parameters x and y in the add method contain a copy of whatever values were passed in when you called the add method. And that is called a pass by value parameter. Later on in the course, we're going to talk about something called references. And references allow you to pass parameters into methods and change the value of the parameter inside the method, and it actually changes the value outside the method. But for right now, if you're passing in integers or doubles or booleans or characters as parameters into a method, then any changes you make to those parameters within the method stays in the method. It's a lot like Vegas. Whatever happens in Vegas stays in Vegas. Same thing is true for these parameters, which are passed by value parameters. Okay, so that ends part 1 of the lecture. I will get back to you in just a second with the second lecture. Bye.